In the 20th century, many were tormented by this puzzle. How did Polynesia come to be settled? Sailors and scientists of every nationality set off in search of adventure, even at the risk of being shipwrecked. Their names were Eric de Bisschop, Francis Cowan, David Lewis, James Siers. And they set sail on this massive ocean in the most unlikely kinds of craft, their aim being to relive the epoch of the first Polynesians and bring their forgotten civilization back from the dead. It was in the 18th century that European explorers first sailed their heavily armed schooners into these waters, where they were amazed to discover the people of these islands. Naval architect James Siers imagines this first contact between Westerners and Tahitians.
When the early European navigators, Captain Cook and Bougainville, arrived in the Pacific, roughly at the same time, the islands, every island, the Tahitian group, the Hawaiian group, the Tongan group, were full of canoes. Big ones, medium-sized ones, small ones. Some designed for crossing the seas, some for coming up on the beach. And the Europeans, the sailors, Cook, Bougainville, etc., accepted them as seagoing boats.
But the colonizers who showed up in Polynesia in the wake of the first explorers were determined to be the undisputed masters of the Pacific.
The double canoes had been basically discouraged from 1850, when the missionaries and the colonial governments got there, because the double canoe was part of the people's culture. And it was a part that gave them freedom. It's the missionaries who start saying that these boats, Polynesians' boats, could not sail to windward, would break up on the high seas, and waves would wash over them.
The missionaries could not accept that Polynesia was settled as a result of an intentional project undertaken by a seafaring civilization. So they came up with another explanation. The geographer, Gerard Ward, explains the two opposing theories which were current at the time.
Either the Polynesians reached Polynesia as a result of intentional exploring voyages. The other theory about the method was that they reached Polynesia as a result of accidents, that the Polynesians did not have sufficiently good canoes to make these long voyages. People have been out fishing, they get blown away, and their boat drifts where the wind and current takes them, and eventually they land somewhere.
The Westerners destroyed the great ocean-going canoes, thereby erasing all evidence for an intentional settlement of the Pacific. In the early 20th century, the Polynesians were left with nothing but their legends to evoke the saga of their origins.
Maori, he was a god and he was human. And Maui is well known throughout the Pacific as a hero figure. At that time he came here and went fishing. He fished up Tahiti, Rarotonga, Hawaii, and then he fished up this land, Aotearoa.
After the Second World War, the Kiki Expedition revived the question of the origins of the Polynesian people. A Norwegian scientist, Thor Heyerdahl, discovered sculptures in the Marquesas Islands, which were very similar to those of Indians in South America. From this, it was a small step to reframe the missionary's old argument with his own variation on the theme. His theory was that the Polynesians' ancestors had come from South America, carried on rafts by the trade winds and their accompanying currents, phenomena well known to sailors of the Pacific Ocean.
C'est un courant qui part d'Amérique du Sud, qui longe l'équateur, qui va jusqu'en Asie. Ce courant-là, c'est un tapis roulant. Il suffit de se positionner dans le train, là, donc sur une esquif quelconque, une baignoire, une chambre à air et un radeau en roseau, et qui va nous emmener automatiquement en Polynésie.
The Kiki Expedition was an international success. Heyerdahl comforted Westerners in their colonialist beliefs. But not everyone agreed. In Tahiti, one man watched the arrival of the Kon-Tiki. His name was Eric de Bisschop, an adventurer who had spent his whole life sailing around the Pacific before dropping anchor in Polynesia. Fascinated by the fishing canoes spared by the missionaries, he used them as his inspiration for building the first catamaran of modern times.
Eric de Bisschop, he'd sailed the Pacific along the areas where the first settlers arrived in the Pacific. So he knew the seas. He went through some very hard voyages. But you must realize that if you live in the sea, you become a part of the sea. And in 1937 built a Camilor, and making a most magnificent voyage. First across the Pacific Ocean, then the Indian Ocean, and round the Atlantic Ocean. So Eric de Bisschop is, in my eyes, one of the greatest pioneers sailing of the 20th century.
Eric de Bisschop's sailing experience backed up his intuitive feeling that the Polynesians had been great navigators, capable of sailing against the wind and the current. At the age of 60, he decided to once again take to the large and prove Thor Heyerdahl wrong by making the Kon-Tiki trip, but backwards, sailing from Tahiti to South America.
Eric de Bisschop, il avait une théorie très, très simple et très pragmatique, c'est qu'un marin ne part jamais avec le vent dans le dos. Il part toujours contre le vent pour pouvoir revenir chez lui. Donc ça c'était la base de sa théorie, de la partie maritime de sa théorie.
He'd make this voyage aboard a raft, just as Heyerdahl had done, a raft he named Tahiti Nui.
C'était une embarcation entièrement en bambou. Oui. Ces bambous reposaient dans une carcasse en bois et aucune pièce métallique ne faisait partie de cet assemblage. Tout était attaché, amarré, oui, et avec de la fibre de coco.
Qui avait donné les plans de cette embarcation?
Les plans de l'embarcation ont été conçus par Eric de Bisschop.
Mais réalisés par vous?
Mais réalisés par l'équipage.
On the 15th of November 1956, the raft was launched in Tahiti. 2 years later, on the radio, Jean Pélissier spoke of this adventure.
Eric de Bisschop était assez impressionnant. Il était très sec, très nerveux. Tout en lui respirait la vitalité. Je lui ai dit, voilà, je voudrais bien partir avec vous. Et il m'a dit textuellement, écoute, tu as une bonne gueule, en principe c'est d'accord, je t'embarque.
Oh, ben, la vie à bord était, c'est comme sur tous les bateaux, on prenait le quart régulièrement, hein. C'est-à-dire toutes les 4 heures, il y avait une équipe, on tournait. L'équipe qui n'était pas de quart, soit elle se reposait, soit elle faisait toutes sortes de travaux, parce que même sur un radeau, il y a tout le temps des choses à réparer, etc. Et puis le reste du temps, on contemplait le large. Quand on est en groupe comme ça, moins on se parle, mieux on se porte, hein. Ça évite les tensions. Puis d'ailleurs, en mer, on n'a pas envie de... En mer, on est très contemplatif, hein. On n'a pas envie de parler particulièrement. Disons qu'on était au ras des pâquerettes, là, hein. C'est pas quand on est en mer sur un bateau, où on est à 3-4 mètres de hauteur sur le pont. Là, on est vraiment à la merci de n'importe quoi. On voit des choses que personne n'a vues. Cette sensation d'être au bord du gouffre, hein, souvent, voilà, ou d'animaux monstrueux qui vont te sauter dessus, parce que c'est la nuit quand même. Bon, on voyait des formes luminescentes en dessous, énormes et tout. Bon, des requins-baleines ou bien des grands calmars. Bon, on a beau avoir un esprit pragmatique et scientifique, on se dit, bon Dieu, j'espère qu'il ne va pas monter.
Le radeau était plus confortable qu'un bateau. Il n'y a jamais une tasse ou un bol qui a glissé de la table par terre. Pour te dire quelle stabilité il avait. C'est-à-dire qu'il bougeait, bien sûr, mais il bougeait en lentement, des mouvements haut et bas, et c'était pas brusque. Jamais de mouvement brusque.
Les radeaux d'Eric de Bisschop étaient équipés de dérives qui lui permettaient de maintenir une route à peu près stable. C'était des embarcations qui naviguaient. Hein. On pouvait légèrement monter au vent, mais on pouvait quand même naviguer au largue, tirer des longs bords, etc. Chose que pouvait pas ou peut faire le radeau de Torre-Heyerdahl, qui lui est parti, s'est laissé aller avec le courant et les vents dominants. Tandis que le radeau d'Eric de Bisschop, surtout entre Papeete et l'Amérique du Sud, il est remonté contre les vents. Hein. Il a fait le contraire. C'est un exploit extraordinaire.
Au Chili, le truc le plus poignant, c'est quand je me suis allongé, c'est merde, c'est fini. C'est fini, quoi. Tu vois, je ne peux pas expliquer. C'est comme si mon âme était partie, c'est fini.
After 6 months, they reached their destination. Eric de Bisschop had shown that a so-called primitive craft could sail towards the wind, contrary to what Heyerdahl had suggested. Several years later, a group of geographers would close the debate.
In the middle 1960s, we used a very big computer. We simulated something like 120,000 voyages, or drift voyages. And the result of this was that accidental voyaging would not explain the settlement of the islands of Polynesia.
The geographers concurred with the opinions of botanists and ethnologists. All of them disputed the theories put forward by the early missionaries and Thor Heyerdahl. The first Polynesians didn't simply drift there from South America.